Shmuel ben Funnye Harav HaKohen. I am the rabbi and spiritual leader of Beth Shalom ben Zakin Ethiopian Hebrew congregation. We are a congregation that was formulated in 1918, making Beth Shalom the second oldest congregation serving the Black Jewish, the Israelite community in the United States. Our history is long, our history is very storied, and we want to share some of that history with you today. But first I want to say that Beth Shalom is a composite of many different Israelite groups who decided many years ago to come and to become a part of a broader community, which we call Beth Shalom. I'd like to introduce two of the members of our congregation today who have served as officers in our community. I believe both of these men have served as president of the Brotherhood and as well as served as treasurer and vice president of our congregation. First, I'd like to introduce to my right, Nasi Yahudah ben Israel. Nasi Yahudah was a longtime member of Bnei Zakin congregation. The Bnei Zakin congregation is, why don't you just stop it, Cecil? Several congregations. We also have with us individuals from the city of Carey, Indiana, and one of those individuals who was a part of a very large Israelite community in Carey is one of our very staunch members and a moreh, a teacher in our community, in the presence of his Hebrew name is Don ben Judah, and we know him better as Big Bruce Carey from Carey, Indiana, and he is sitting immediately to my left, and I'd like to say to our moreh, Shalom.
Shalom, Rabbi.
And welcome.
Thank you.
So brothers, I just want us to take a couple of minutes to share a few of our experiences and how we come to be in this space, how you come to be in this space here at Beth Shalom ben Zakin Ethiopian Hebrew congregation. So now see if I can start with you. I'd like to just ask you to give us a little background about the Nezakin and then speak to what compelled you and your family to become a part of Beth Shalom?
Okay, Rabbi. It started for me in around 1967. During the winter months, I think it was in January, and a lot happened during that year for me. I was supposed to go to my high school graduation, but if we all know it had a big snow.
This great Chicago
Chicago snow where the Creator just shut everything down, and couldn't go to my own graduation. But there was a lot of other things happening in my life at that time. But that was one of the biggest things. And we had the Vietnam War, you had the Civil Rights Movement and all. But in the area that I grew up on, the west side of Chicago, there was some Hebrews there, and they was from Bnei Zakin, in the early years. So, in my neighborhood, you had Muslims, you had the Black Panther movement, and then you had the Hebrews. So I couldn't really relate with the Muslims or the Black Panthers, even though I knew of both of the groups. But the brothers that I was mostly connected with and I grew up with was Hebrews. So I decided to, study and learn. And so that's really what got my attention about Israel. So I studied and talked with them, and they helped me out a lot. And doing my study and praying, I was able to, gain a little more knowledge. And when Bnei Zakin started here in Chicago, and I think it was around '68, we started on Stony Island. Prince Reuben had come down from New York at the time to start the Knesset here, you know, and it was Prince Naphtali, Prince Daniel, a lot of other the brothers that helped form B'nai Zakin here in Chicago.
So that's B'nai Zakin on Stony Island. I believe you were next door to the Greyhound bus station.
Right,
And
right.
you had to go down about 3 or 4 steps to
in
get
the
into
basement,
your camp.
In the basement, yeah.
There on Stony Island.
Yeah.
So how old were you, Prince, when you first joined and you were located on Stony Island?
I was about 19 years old, fresh out of high school, which I didn't go to my graduation, but I was about 19.
About 19 years old. So Prince, we're going to come back to you. I just kind of want to talk a little bit and introduce and have Moreh Don Ben Judah talk to us a little bit about how he came in to the house of Israel and what community. What was the name of the community in Carey? I don't know that you brothers had a name.
Actually, you're absolutely correct, Rabbi. We were just known as the Brothers from Carey.
The brothers from Carey.
Right.
Okay. So how did you come into Israel, Moreh?
Well, the way I came into Israel was a quite interesting experience. I was attending Indiana University Northwest, and at that time, between classes, a group of young men came in, and they were dressed in African garb, and they all had Bibles, and they began to talk about the connection between African people and the Bible. And seeing that I grew up in a very religious home, I challenged them because I didn't quite believe what they were saying. And so I took it upon, I told these guys at this time that I was going to disprove what they were trying to teach in terms of African people being connected with the people of Israel and the Bible. Seeing that I had grown up in a Pentecostal environment, my grandfather had been a Pentecostal minister, and I was very familiar with the scriptures, particularly New Testament scriptures. And so I sought to disprove it. So I began to study on my own. And in the course of my trying to disprove them, I began to find out that many of the things that they said were true, that I had not actually looked at previously. At this time, I was about the age of 20 years old.
Let me ask you, you said that the group was simply known as the Brothers from Carey.
Yes.
How did the Brothers from Carey, how did you get together? Who was the focal point of who served as the synergy to bring you guys together? Did you meet in the home? Did you meet in the park?
Well, there was the way that occurred was this. There was a young man by the name of Levi, or we used to refer to as Levi. And Levi had a sister who was living in Israel at the time, in Dimona, Israel. And she was married to a guy by the name of Gabriel Gadol. And that was his connection with Israel at that time. And so they hadn't been too long moved into the state of Israel, and they were in need of various items to survive.
So of course you're talking about the Black Hebrews of Dimona, Israel, headed by Ben-Ami Israel, Ben-Ami Carter, who came from the Chicago metropolitan area and left for first Africa, I believe Liberia, in the 1960s, and in early part of the 71,
Yes,
they made their migration to Israel and settled in Dimona. So the Brothers from Carey, it seems, were a financial support mechanism for the community in Dimona, Israel.
right. What happened was, the way that occurred, actually Levi was supposed to have gone to Israel with them, but he was drafted and by the United States Army. And at that time, he refused to fight and try to get status as a conscientious objector.
So were you ever a member of the KOG or the KOY?
Technically, we were never members of the KOY. We were basically a support system. Basically, what had occurred is there were philosophical differences between what we had come to believe versus some of the teachings that were coming out of the KOY.
But now let's because I want to keep the focus on Gary and on the brother, so that you were with the brother Levy, and from Levy he had a relative with the group in Dimona, Israel, and through this you brothers began to help,
Yeah, we
and they
began to-
were raising funds and helping them in other ways. There were philosophical differences, but through all of this, the brothers from Gary never did you ever charter. Was there ever a chartered group from Gary that you were a member of that identified yourselves as Israelites?
Well, there was never a charter. As I said, we met in the home, and all our Sabbath services, Hebrew classes, anything history classes, they took place in the home on 2140 East 19th Place in Gary, in the Marshalltown area.
In the Marshalltown area?
Yeah, and the rest of it took place at the Gary Public Library, which we spent a number of hours there studying.
Now, let's bring this back a little bit. What drew you to Beth Shalom congregation?
Now,
And how long have you been here?
I've been a member of Beth Shalom going on now 10 years.
Mm-hmm.
And what drew me into Beth Shalom was the fact that I wanted to practice Judaism, and actually I was encouraged by a sister from the continent of Africa. She had to come 6,000 miles and to meet me, and in the course of us studying, I decided I wanted to date her. And her becoming from a very religious background, from the Catholic order, she said to me that we could not date unless I found a synagogue or a religious home to attend. In my desire to date her, I began to search out the Israelite community in Chicago where I felt I could be comfortable, that was not necessarily connected with any of the previous Israelite camps that I had been in contact with. And so I spoke to a brother that I had met and grew up with in Gary by the name of James Brazelton. And Mr. Brazelton I had seen 4 years previously, who had told me that he was attending a synagogue on 87th in Houston. When I talked to her about attending the synagogue, I remembered a conversation I had had 4 years previously. And I wasn't even sure if that synagogue was still there 4 years later. So I ventured over there, and during the course of my venturing over there, I met a group of men that I felt had organization, dedication, and they had substance that I could find myself embracing. And so from that point on, I began to attend Beth Shalom.
And become a very, very supportive member of our congregation. If I might be able to add that, one of our most prolific teachers, and also just a man that is always willing to step forward and lend his support. So, Prince, if we can kind of redirect and ask you, your sojourn to Beth Shalom, I believe, and just correct me if I don't have all of the story right, but there was your ultimate spiritual leader here was Prince Yaakov. And Prince Yaakov came from New York, but he actually came from New York, I think, by way of Cincinnati or something like that. So, and actually, I understand that he comes out of a group called Beth Shalom in New York, where Prince Hezekiah and some of the old timers really knew Prince Yaakov. And he went back many, many years.
Rabbi Raphael.
And Rabbi Raphael Tate, a giant in the Israelite community.
Well, come to find out later, he was instrumental in starting
Bnei Zakin.
Him and Prince Yaakov.
Him and Prince Yaakov. And I know that Rabbi Tate, as I said, was a giant, but he had a heart of gold.
Yes,
And Rabbi Tate was always just supportive. From the first time I met him, and I was My wife and I happened to be in New York when he passed and were able to attend Rabbi Tate's funeral a few years ago. But take us to, I think Prince Yaakov was sick and
Yeah, I think that was around 80, sometime in the 80s. He was sick with, I think it was emphysema,
Mhm.
and he passed away. And at that time, Ben Zakim was pretty dispersed. A lot of brothers had went their way, and there was some families, myself and Prince Daniel and a few other brothers, we all would come together on holy days and still share and
Stop it.
teach.
Just stop. Saying Prince Yaakov passed,
Yeah.
and several, you, Prince Daniel, several other members, I think Chief
Shemaiah.
Shemaiah. What about Chief Shlomo?
Chief Shlomo.
And some of his family?
Yeah, some of his family.
So you brothers and sisters would get together?
Yeah, we would come together. We would at least try to do the 3 times a year that all males appear, and that's Passover was one of the big ones.
Mm-hmm.
Yom Kippur, we would always come together, and we always would try to do something during Shavuot,
Mm-hmm.
and to go over and to reminisce on how it was at Beth Shalom, and also
That been Zakin.
at Ben Zakin, and keep alive
Mhm.
the spirit of Israel, how we were practicing.
Mm-hmm.
So after that, we wanted to reach out and get involved with other brothers that we knew and grew up with, but was in different camps at that time. We call them camps, Knesses, and that was like Kohen Abdi and Moshe Buie and a lot of other Israelites that we knew.
Mhm.
So that opportunity did present itself. At one evening, we all got together and we decided to come together for a Pesach.
Mm-hmm.
I think you were there that particular evening. So that was what really started us coming together and really making it feasible that we could sit down and do things together within the Hebrew community, really come together. And that, to me, that was a start. And we was able to, move from that point.
Mm-hmm. And we came together and became Beth Shalom, Ben Zakin, Ethiopian Hebrew congregation. But when this congregation started in 1918, it was known as the Ethiopian Hebrew Settlement Workers Association. And they retained that name into the 1920s. Some of the early leadership of this community included a gentleman by the name of Horace Hassan. I was told that he was from Bombay by one of the elders at that time, Mother Rosalie Brown. I don't know, I've never really been able to verify that he was indeed from Bombay, India, but I do know that in the late teens, in 1919, Rabbi Stifson and Rabbi Lazarus came to Chicago from New York, and their level of Hebrew knowledge and training far exceeded that Horace Hassan had. And Rabbi Hassan saw that it made sense for him to have his community become a part of the community of Rabbi Stifson and Rabbi Lazarus. We really only know that this history because in 1925, September the 9th, the Chicago Tribune carried a story about 2 colored rabbis who went into Judge Harry Hamlin's court to defend one of the members, whose name was Elizabeth Miller, who had gone into an establishment owned by some of our Jewish brothers in the Ashkenazi community, soliciting funds for the Ethiopian Settlement Workers Association. Unfortunately, our beloved brothers of the Ashkenazi community did not see Miss Miller as being Jewish and subsequently called the police on her. We are blessed that these men, these rabbis, were able to go into the court and defend their member. We're further blessed because we would not have had this story if it had not been for our Rabbi Abahu Reuben. Rabbi Reuben joined the community in the 1920s, in 1923. He was a young man in 1925 when Rabbi Stiffson and Lazarus went to the courtroom of Harry Hamlin and defended Elizabeth Miller. But Rabbi Reuben cherished that newspaper article, and it was in 1989 that Rabbi Reuben called me to his home one day, and he said, I have some things that I want to give you. And that particular newspaper article from the Chicago Tribune, dated 1925, was one of them. And I have to tell you how honored I felt that the rabbi felt secure enough in passing on, in my humble hands, some of the lineage of our community that he had retained. Rabbi Abahu ben Rubain, may his memory be for a blessing, served as spiritual leader and rabbi of the Congregation of Ethiopian Hebrews from 1947, and he was the spiritual leader of Beth Shalom Ethiopian Hebrew congregation until he passed away in 1991, in February of 1991. Rabbi Reuben did not live to see Beth Shalom B'nai Zakin Ethiopian Hebrew congregation grow and occupy some of the spaces that we have had, but I know that in his heart of hearts, Rabbi Reuben always believed in the capacity and the ability of our community. But I think one of the most unique aspects of Beth Shalom was said by another brother in the Israelite community. He said, you mean to tell me a Kohen and a rabbi and a prince are all working together in the same community? How is that possible? A Kohen, a rabbi, and a prince? They had never heard or seen that collaboration before. So I think one of the things that I am most proud of is the confidence that a prince, in the presence of Nasi Yahudah ben Israel, and a moreh and a teacher in his own right from Carey, in the presence of our good brother Don ben Judah, and an elder who's distinguished in our community in the presence of Elder Moshe Buie, and his father, Elder Eliyahu ben Israel Buie, and our Kohen Avdi ben Levi and his family, were comfortable and confident enough to come gather yourselves together, O nation not desire. And I believe that that's the prophet Zephaniah, who encourages Israel to gather themselves together. So we thank God that all of us were not here when this congregation started in 1918. Well, none of us were. But we are here today. We're here today carrying out that legacy. This legacy includes our work with Rabbi Wentworth A. Matthew, who ordained Rabbi Abahu ben Rubain. We have a picture from 1952 when Rabbi Matthew, the chief rabbi of the black Jewish community in the Western Hemisphere, made his way, one of several trips that he made to Chicago to visit with the community here in the presence of my teacher and mentor, Chief Rabbi Levi ben Levi. May his memory be for a blessing. My teacher, Rabbi Helu Paris, Rabbi Poinsett, and Rabbi Raphael Tate, all of the wonderful men and women, Rabbi Yohanatan, Rabbinite Yohanatan, Mother Louise Elizabeth Daly from Philadelphia. All of these men and women that have come before us are the reason that we are able to stand today and seek a sense of cooperation to build our community. So we are here, Beth Shalom, the Nezakin Ethiopian Hebrew congregation. We come from Carey, Indiana, in the presence of our Moreh and our friend, Moreh Dan ben Yahudah, all the way from a South Sider getting along with a West Sider, in the presence of Nasi Yahudah ben Yisrael, and all of the men and women who are part of this community, who make Beth Shalom what it is today. Our motto is from generation to generation. And we all, I would think, I know we would agree, that we want our children and our grandchildren and our grandchildren's children to be living this way of life as Jews, as members of the house of Yisrael. This is our hope for them, and this is our hope for your children as well. Prince, I want to say Todah Rabbi for taking time to sit with me in this brief discussion. Moreh, I want to say Todah Rabbi to you.
Thank you also, Rabbi,
for taking the time to sit with me and sharing with us a little of the experience of the brothers from Carey. So we have to work out the Hebrew on that. The brothers from Carey, and have that as the name of the Knesset. I like that, the brothers from Carey. You know, that actually spells a deep amount of humility when you don't name yourself, but consistently just me. So we thank God.
and I had to say, Rabbi, I was fortunate because the sister that insisted that I find brought a wealth, she became my wife, and that was Chief Deli Jane Osali, Carey. And it was just a total blessing to take that experience and later embark upon a new and wider experience as the House of Israel continues to grow, not just here in America, but throughout the entire world.
And specifically in Africa.
Specifically in Africa.
On the continent of Africa, where we are working with our brothers and sisters in Nigeria, amongst the Igbo, the Igbo, the Yoruba, and what's the other tribe?
The Orobo.
Orobo.
Yeah. The Yeshishikiri.
And the Yeshishikiri. All of these brothers claim connections to the ancient Hebrews. One of the things that we have been working with them is, even though you are from different tribes today, we're all from one tribe, and that tribe is Yisrael. To our brothers and sisters that we are working with in South Africa, to our brothers and sisters in the presence of our very dear friend, Rabbi Gershom in Uganda, to the whole house of Israel, all of our brothers and sisters in New York, in Philadelphia, Atlanta, California, in the state of Israel, those who believe in principles of justice and truth and righteousness. We seek to work, we seek to understand. Thank you so very much for joining us on this journey on the history of Beth Shalom, the Nezakin Ethiopian Hebrew congregation. Thank you, Todah Rabba, and Shalom Ubraka. Peace and blessings to you. Our congregation in celebration of 90 years of being actively involved on the formation of our congregation and celebration of 90 years of being actively involved as the Israelite congregation in the city of Chicago. I'm pleased to introduce another member of our community, a sister who has served as in several positions of office, as officer for the sisterhood. You were, I think, vice president of the congregation.
No,
of the
vice of the sisterhood, vice president. No, treasurer of the congregation, assistant treasurer.
So that's in the presence of Sister Candace A. Smith, Sister Shahid. So I wanted to just say welcome and thank you for joining me. And I wanted us to focus a little bit on the merger of Congregation Beth Shalom with the Congregation of Ethiopian Hebrews. So when did you come into the House of Israel? When did you become a member? When did you become Jewish?
I joined Beth Shalom.
Well, was Beth Shalom your first congregation?
No, it was House of Israel.
Hebrew
Culture Center on 87th
7th
Street.
Street, 1347,
Right.
West 87th
When
Street.
I joined Rabbi Yahudah.
Yes.
Right.
Gaston Sample.
Sample, right. He had just became the spiritual leader when I joined the congregation. I guess we used to do the traveling Bible studies, and that was a big impact that helped keep me focused and helped me to learn more about myself and my heritage.
Travel, where do we go? From city to city?
Houses to houses.
Oh, house to house. Okay. Okay.
Houses to houses.
House to house. Okay.
For Bible studies, and that was very learning and eye awakening experience for me. But anyway, I came up under Gaston Sample, and then we left from that congregation. Beth Shalom was formed, and I can't remember the exact year Beth Shalom was formed, but I remember we were meeting in my mother's basement.
1983.
We even had a couple of Passover celebrations there.
Yes, we did.
And then from there, we left and went to a little smaller place, Rabbi Reuben's congregation.
Which was the
Congregation of Ancient Hebrews.
Congregation
Ethiopian
of Ethiopian Hebrews.
And we met and merged with Rabbi Reuben's congregation, and there we formed a bond with the members there. And as we started growing, and I personally enjoyed the smaller knit congregation that we had. Everybody was very, very, very family oriented. I know our motto is from generation to generation. To me, it's all about family, and that's what I think our congregation is supposed to represent.
And to represent family. Now, I believe that several members of the congregation also enrolled their children in Jewish day school.
At one time, I think our congregation had more students in the school than it was more black Jews up in there than there was white Jews.
Yeah, and when I say that to people sometimes, they find that kind of hard to believe, so that our children never got lost.
No, they didn't.
In losing touch with the reality of who they were, the reality of where they came from, and because we made up probably a third of the school's population were children from our congregation.
Right, because I think that the classes were so small. If I'm not mistaken, one of my children's classroom size was 8 total, and I think out of that 8, 3 were black.
Right.
3 were black, yes.
We had people like Sar, Mikael, Yeshua ben Yahudah.
Right, his children.
His sons.
The Edwards family.
Well, his sons were Mikael and Avniel.
Yes.
Then the Edwards, Ralph and Vondell Edwards.
Right, their
and
children.
their 3 daughters. Can you name them?
Eden, Elizabeth, and Erica.
And then we had the McCullough family.
Right.
Tammy
and Heather.
And then we also had your kids who were
Matthew and Angela.
And then we had the Levy family who had Gadiel. Levy was there. Kohen Abdi and Dr. Deborah Levy's son, Gadiel, also attended Akiba. And then Rabbinite Miriam and myself had all 4 of our children at Akiba Shekta Jewish Day School. So that we really, and then there were a few other black families or interracial families
in the school.
Whose children really identified with our children as well. So when you count those children, you're right. We probably made up 50% of the student body. Yeah, you are absolutely right. I forgot about the interracial families.
And then don't forget Rabbi
Nolan's
son and daughter
were there for a while.
They were there for a
when
while.
The kids first started school there. Yeah, and we really tried to encourage other Hebrews at that time to send their children to the school. And we would have had a super majority of the student population. So what was the thing? So you came out of the House of Israel Hebrew Culture Center under the leadership of Rabbi Yehoshua, who, may his memory be for a blessing. He passed away a few years ago, but I understand now that his middle son, Moshe, has taken over, and that his congregation, the Tabernacle of Israel. Is doing well and moving forward. So we're very happy, again, of the whole saying of from generation to generation, that we look forward to our young people moving forward. So you have been a part of the Hebrew way of life for how many years now?
Well, I guess about 28, 29 years.
28 to 29 years. And so in that time, there's been an awful lot of growth that you've seen taking part on the congregation, as it has grown from family home basement to the living room of Rabbi Reuben, to the basement for the Passover service, to renting spaces in different churches
locations, right,
for different Passovers, where people would let us go in and kosher their kitchens and their churches so that we could have the Seder. So we've had some wonderful friends, both in the Christian community and the Muslim community along the way, till our first little place on 53rd and Winchester, where our main sanctuary may have been about the size of this library, until our move to 8927 South Houston, when we acquired the Agudas Achim B'Kolam synagogue there, until Beth Shalom's was able to acquire this facility here in 2004. So you've seen a lot of growth. But you really liked it when it was tight-knit and smaller, and everybody was pure family.
Right, everybody was family. And if they weren't, it was just like they were family.
They weren't
all went to school.
family.
They went to school together. They knew each other. You could chastise that child and not worry about a mother or father.
So you were talking about the kids that were growing up, and they all grew up in that singular environment.
Right.
So, but now that we are larger, now that we are bigger, I mean, I hope that you're happy about that as well.
Well, I'm happy to see so many people get more involved in this way of life, to come to an awareness that they're Israel. I am happy to see that. I'm happy to see all the little children that we have in the congregation. I'm happy for the growth, but I still do like this tight knit. I'm sorry. I don't like it. I mean, I like our congregation now, and it's an adjustment. But you know, in life you adjust.
You have to. I want to thank you for your time and for the services that you provided to Beth Shalom, to Beth Shalom Ethiopian Hebrew Congregation, and to Beth Shalom the Nezakim Ethiopian Hebrew Congregation, for all the services that you've done and your commitment and your family's commitment. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. It's been a pleasure.